Here we go, Misty. So fabulous to have you with us today. And
Having me.
this series, Learn to Listen, that we've been doing. I just can't wait to hear more of your story and share some of that wonderful information with all the people that have been chiming in and listening to all these incredible leaders such as yourself. So welcome.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here. And by the way, I love the name of this series, the Learn to Listen. I think if you took a quick scroll through Amazon or iTunes, there's a lot about, getting your voice out there, or, it's like all projected type stuff, tell the world your story. So I just love to flip the script, and it's like learning to listen.
That's fabulous. Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, for those who don't know you, I'll just do a little intro, but let you share quite a bit more. I know that you are a mom and a wife, and also Misty's Unlimited, that's an incredible aspect of what you have founded, as well as more than just great dancing. I know you're an author, you're an advocate. There's a deep well here. So if you could just share a little bit more about who you are and just some of the journey that you feel like God has had you on and where you are in life right now, that would be beautiful.
Well, thank you. And there's nothing I like to tell better than a good God story. So I'll give you the background here. So I really, really thought I would be an A-Leigh dancer. So now if you're watching me and looking at me, you're probably thinking like, I don't know if this Norwegian from Wisconsin's a automatic fit for the A-Leigh school, but I just thought that was the ultimate. I still think it's the ultimate. So and this is pre-internet, by the way, guys. So this is me in college, finding an article about the A-Leigh school in Dance Magazine, finding their audition tour, going to an actual travel agent, calling a hotel, like over the library to find a phone book, to find a name of a hotel in New York. So I just want to lay out the level of dedication I had put toward getting myself an audition for the A-Leigh school here. This wasn't like grab your phone and RSVP on an Instagram ad. So I went out there and I visited a friend that I had met at the Harvard Summer Dance School. She let me stay with her. And that was a great experience to the school. And we did the whole audition. I thought it went fairly well. I took a few classes ahead of time because I didn't have a lot of training in modern, but I had enough movement vocabulary to follow along. I had a strength for ballet and for jazz, so I was kind of able to piece some of it together. And at the end, everybody got called up to say whether or not you were accepted to their training school or not. And I'm sitting there, and everyone goes, and finally I'm left, and the people are getting up to leave. And this friend of mine, Marcia, her name was, got up and advocated. She's like, but my friend Misty's here. You haven't spoken to my friend Misty. And so they're like, oh yeah, you're in. and that was it. And I think they still have this program, but it was a 9-month training program. And I went home just happy as a clam. By the way, I don't know if clams are happy, but that's a phrase we use here in Wisconsin. So I'm happy as a clam. I get home and I'm like, that's it. I know I'm going to be an A-Leigh dancer. I had it charted. I'm like, I'm going to go to the training school. I'll get invited to the second company. Then the first, like, this is the path. This is the path. And ironically, or maybe not ironically, the A-Leigh company was performing in our capital city, Madison. So I'm like, well, of course, I'm going to go watch the A-Leigh company perform. So I drive there and I'm watching it. And of course, they're doing their iconic Revelations. Yeah. And I'm watching Revelations, and I have what is probably, one of the few audible God revelations I've had in my life. Like you can actually hear something, not like, oh, I have an impression. I think I'm called. I feel like I should. I actually heard words in my heart. And what I heard was, what will you remember of this performance a week from now, a month from now, or a year from now? And what will your students remember of you for a lifetime? And I just slid down in that chair. I was like, oh, because I knew that as much as I was mesmerized watching what was happening on stage, like, here it is 20 some years later, and I really can't remember much about that performance. And I'm still getting it. Even today, I got tagged in a Facebook post from somebody who was in my class 20 years ago saying how it changed their life. That just happened an hour ago. So, for me, I knew that I had to let the classroom be my stage. And that's not a calling for everybody. For some people, they are absolutely called to the stage, and that's going to be their ministry platform, but it wasn't for me. And God just made it very clear that the classroom was to be my stage. So I came home, got on the rotary phone in the kitchen, dialed the A-Leigh school, said, I'm not coming. And, of course, mind you, I'd already told everybody I was going. So kind of makes things difficult when you've declared a God path to the world and then you have to backtrack because God tells you something different. So really, I don't think it was my God path to go to the Ailey School. It was my dream to do that. And there happened to be some, circumstantial, small yeses that seemed like it was opening that door, but the clear voice was, let the classroom be your stage. So that's how I ended up with a dance school at 21 years old. Was just following that very clear calling. Cynthia, I didn't have any idea what I was doing. I, at that time, had just finished or was finishing up college with a Spanish degree, not super useful for a dance school. So I decided that I would go on to graduate school and get a master's of education because I was like, well, if I'm going to end up being a teacher, I better figure out how to be the best teacher I can be. So I ended up getting a graduate degree in education and writing a TAP curriculum as my culminating project. So that's how I got into dance school life. Today, our school's been here for 22 years. We just built a brand new 21,000 square foot facility. It's beautiful. Please, anybody come visit. And we run right now about 850 students. We'll probably close out at about 1,000 this year. Okay. And then 8 years ago, I had another one of those audible, like it's time to do your next thing. And guess what the message was this time? I think you'll get a kick out of this. Get your house in order. Okay. I mean, for like 18 months, that's all I heard in my heart was get your house in order. And I mean, I had no idea what that meant. I'm looking around like, I don't know. Does that mean I get a Pottery Barn lamp? Does that mean like, do the socks not match? Like, what does get your house in order? I would take the dog for a walk every day. I'm like, what, God, what does that mean? What I came to understand was it meant get your physical home in order because you're going to be sent out. And that I had 5 kids at the time. Like that's going to need to be fairly well organized. And get your studio in order because you're going to teach other people how to run studios. Okay. So that's when I started More Than Just Great Dancing. Another thing that I had no idea how to do. And now 8 years later, we have almost 300 affiliated schools serving about 120,000 kids a week. Wow. So there's been obviously many other, yes to God moments. And there's been many, no, God, I can't, I don't know if I could moments, but thankfully, he's patient and redeems those and teaches and sometimes has to shout to get me back on the path. But those are the 2 big ones that really stand out in my dance specific story.
Wow, that's beautiful. Well, before I get into some of those questions, I'd love for you to share a little bit more about just the premise of More Than Just Great Dancing, what it is and how it is a service institution for others.
Absolutely. So the context was, as I was out, I was writing for a national magazine. I'd published probably around 50 articles. I was speaking and keynoting at conferences, and people would line up afterwards, sometimes waiting in line for an hour and a half to ask questions. And what I thought was normal, the way we were doing things in Misty's Dance Unlimited, found out was not normal. For example, there's a super high incidence of stressed out people, broken families, divorce, people have lost their health. Like the toll that it takes to run a business in the arts is a really high price that a lot of people have paid to, follow that call and do what they love. So, the fact that we were doing it with a relatively high degree of health and stability, I think that turned people's heads towards us. The fact that I was able to make a good living and make a life with my family, I think that was a head turner. And I think the final piece was that we were doing it without compromising kids. So there were a lot of studios 10 years ago that were doing well financially. And, that's when think of all the big dance shows were coming on TV and competition life was really building up. So, there was economic opportunity in dance, but some people had followed that at the expense of kids. And we had never once compromised kids in our growth strategy. And then we were giving a lot in the community. So if I could kind of boil it down to those things, I hadn't compromised kids. We were giving in the community. We had healthy economics in our studio and we had a healthy life. People would wait in line to hear about that. They would call, they would ask studio visits. And I did that just gratis for a couple years. And all that same time, I was kind of hearing this, get your house in order. And I didn't connect the two. I was like, I don't know if people need help. I'm just going to help. Because I wish that if I had had those words when I was a younger studio owner, I would have wanted somebody to help me. And I was hearing this, get your house in order. And finally, what I realized is what people are asking for is community. They're asking for ongoing support. Yeah. They're asking for something more than a 3-day mountaintop experience at a conference. Like if you look out to the the model of the church, you know, the reason why we have church, we have to like, because we continually have to go renew our mind. We have to continually be in fellowship. We have to continually like root ourselves, because life is nothing but constant drift, right? You know, like here's me Sunday morning, here's me Sunday afternoon, you know, like I'm already, there's a million competing priorities.
Yeah.
That's why you can't go to a church conference or a Christmas service and call it good for a year.
Right.
That's why you can't go to a dance conference or a business conference and call it good for a year, because life is just a series of fighting against that drift. So I think we found a special place that really spoke to the ongoing needs of studio owners.
Excellent. Excellent. And then I think lastly for this part, maybe we can share more at the end. I know that there's some online platforms where people can connect with you. And so we can share all those links, but if there's anything you want to share about that aspect of it, that would be really wonderful, because I know they're coming to conference, gaining a lot of really incredible information, but they have access to information online as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So as a service to the dance community, twice every month, we'll put out some sort of a inspirational or business topical blog post that we will put out. We have an annual conference that is open to members and non-members called Studio Owner University. And then we have something very excited, which is focused towards the industry at large. It's called Youth Protection Advocates in Dance. It was a nonprofit started by Leslie Scott Zanovich. And I want to say that was in 2013. I'd have to double check that date. I'm a mom of 5, so like anything earlier than breakfast, I'm like a little soft on the dates. But she started that as a nonprofit, and she was a professional dancer working in LA, and just really came of age during the rise of where the education of dance crossed the entertainment industry. You know, it was the explosion of YouTube. It was the explosion of conventions and TV shows and competitions. So she came up in that time, and she would be the first to say that, you know, she was following that path 100%. And she's awesome woman of faith, and she just, you know, came to a realization that she couldn't continue in good conscience to follow that path, because she saw the damage it was doing to kids long term, you know, whether that was hypersexualized messaging in movement, or whether it was injuries caused by repetitive use, or moves that they shouldn't have been doing that were age appropriate, developmentally inappropriate. So she put together an advisory panel with really smart doctors and psychologists and nutritionists and sports med people and dance studio owners, and said, how can we do better? So More Than Just Great Dancing was their visionary sponsor for 4 years. And then she came to a point where she needed to focus on raising her own family. And she asked if we would pick that up and bring it into the More Than Just Great Dancing family, which we did do in January of this year, which is 2019. And we spent the whole first half of the year just kind of reorganizing it, getting it onto a really user-friendly digital experience. And right now we have over 1,500 dance teachers beta testing it online. And the cool thing is we split it into 2 pieces. The first piece is safety, and we address background checks. We have a national agreement with the Red Cross to provide CPR first aid and AED training, injury prevention response, sex abuse prevention and awareness and response. That's all on the safety side. We also have safety in the physical environment, which really nobody's touched in dance yet. So, you know, our studios are like schools. So if you look at what schools are doing, you know, schools are preparing with fire drills and weather emergencies and, you know, aggressor threats like active shooter training. So we have all of that inside the safety piece. And then we have a wellness piece. And that's where you get into the part that requires more thoughtful discussion. Like we're talking about nutrition and wellness and eating disorders, online safety, cyberbullying, what's conflict, what's bullying, what are age-appropriate artistic choices for kids. And the reason we split it is very strategic. We feel like there's going to be near to 100% adoption on the safety course. Like nobody argues about a background check is black and white. Nobody says, you know, hey, when I do 6 compressions on CPR, you know, it's better. It's just safety's fairly black and white. Right. It gets a little bit more gray when you start talking about wellness, and there's, you know, various, you know, opinions and experiences and market differences there. But we feel like if we can get consensus in the industry that safety matters, we can open a thoughtful dialogue about healthy artistic choices and about what it means to be well as a dancer. So we're doing a big public launch on December 5th and inviting the broader dance community to be a part of this conversation and to participate in the training. Excellent.
That's wonderful. Well, I've been able to look through a portion of the materials thus far, and it's brilliant. It's just so well done,
Well,
really.
hats off to the advisory panel and to Leslie Scott Zanovich. I mean, they really did the base of the work. I just got to come in and frost the cake and get it ready for market.
It's beautiful. It's so beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Well, with this series of learning to listen, really, we are so inspired by leaders as they're sharing how they are cultivating that very skill of learning to listen. And we've already heard some of your story, but I know that there's probably some other nuggets of ways that you personally are discerning what is God's yes, or how is God moving and stirring in your life. And that might be personally, might be in relationships, it could be in your business, but just ways you really feel like God's just stirring, and you know that you need to listen.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I love that word stirring, because I think it's the closest description that I can have of what it feels like when he's about to do something. I need to pay attention.
Yeah.
You know, it's like maybe I feel a little unsettled, or I might feel my curiosity rising, or I start asking questions. So for me, that's usually a cue to listen. And I will be the first to say that listening is not my first mode. You know, if you take a DISC profile test, if you like those personality things, I'm fairly high on the D side. I'm like the go. You know, I just like get it done. And I'm pretty good at working people under the table, of gritting my teeth and pushing through things, you know, of being forward facing. I don't like anything in vision. You know, I always know where my face is pointed. But when I start to feel that, like, oh, Misty, you better slow down. You better put a lid on this. And maybe it's time to ask some questions. Maybe it's time to journal. Maybe it's time to sit. Those are all listening cues for me. And that's when and I'm in a season of listening cues right now, to be totally candid. We just finished this beautiful construction. I keep looking this way because I can see it out my window. Our beautiful brand new International Performing Arts Center. You know, it's home to our studio, it's home to a yoga studio, it's home to all of our trainings. So I think when you go through a period of anything where that path is set, and it's like, I know what we're doing, we're going, and it's just like, you just have to grind it out. You have to be careful at the end of that to come back into a period of listening, curiosity, thoughtfulness, and rest, because you can acclimate yourself to that go. And if that go muscle doesn't have a God purposeful thing to go against, if that makes sense.
Sure.
You know, like, I know, like, I'll just keep going, and I'll absolutely get myself into trouble.
Yeah.
100%. So I'm in a period right now of pulling back, putting a lid on things, really listening, really equipping my team. And I would say, I think it's important to let the people outside of you know whether or not you're in go and grow, or whether or not you're in like dig and plant and listen.
Yeah.
Because I've often assumed people could understand what's in my head over the years, and surprised you know, like, I'm continually surprised that they can't.
Yeah.
You know, like, here's a great example. Inside my own team here, you know, we had built something. We're like, I think we're going to build this, and, you know, we're going to do this thing with it. And then I had totally changed my mind. I'm like, no, I'm going to do this other thing with it. Well, we just had an employee come up for her annual review, and she said, well, you know, I'm a little bit afraid, because her job was attached to this thing that we were going to like maybe move on from. She's like, I have a little bit of job insecurity because you said you were doing this. I'm like, oh my gosh, didn't I tell you? Like, I'm not doing that with that anymore. I'm like totally buckled down and growing it. But, you know, it just shows how important communication is.
Yes.
And, you know, to get clear and to share what you're learning with the people around you. Yeah, so that was a lesson I just had to learn a couple weeks ago.
That's good. And it's so hard, right? I mean, just being married, you know, in relationship, having children, employees, people that we happen to walk on the planet with, you know, we have to communicate with them. Something that you said made me think about, as we are in that production mode. So maybe it's building a facility, an architectural design.
Putting on recital or a show, or completing a dance, like anything where, you know, winning looks like this. Winning looks like a 3-minute 3-year-old dance. Winning looks like getting a building off the ground. Winning looks like getting through summer vacation.
Yeah. And then taking that reprieve after you've had the presentation or performance, or you've created a new established division of a business, part of your business, or whatever it is. I know, just being around performing arts most all of my life, I remember performing, and then all that preparation, and then you'd stop because the performance was over, And then it was almost like a sense of depression, or just this, decline of, again, what's your worth or value, or you've been on this heightened, excelled,
Yeah.
just adrenaline, or just, all those different things that happen while you're in performance mode. And so I think that's the body's even natural way of saying to itself, I need to slow down. So if we can attune, our spirit, our mind, our body, everything together to realize just this place that you're articulating, that it's so important and it's so valuable to make sure that we're having that quietness and stillness, because without the rooting, then we aren't stable to be able to start something new.
That's so good. We have a phrase here that we call it, just kind of tongue in cheek, but we call it post-recital stress disorder. And, obviously that's not, meant to make light of people who have true traumatic post-stress to true traumatic things, but it's just the closest thing we can grab from our lexicon to say we go through this thing and afterwards we wander around for weeks to months like we can't find that new normal. Right. Because if you're just thinking of leading up to a show, all you have to do is look at your list. You don't have to think in the morning. Yeah. You will be told what to do. And if you don't even make the list, your email will tell you what to do. Somebody's going to demand something from you. Yeah. That will tell you what to do. And then that curtain drops or the building's over. And then all of a sudden you're, kind of in this gray space, this fog of like, nobody's telling me what to do. There's no imminent pressing list. And to me, that's always a cue of like, I need to not be moving fast in this time because I don't have a direction. Yeah. And I'm just going to kick up a lot of dust and probably make a lot of people angry. Like my husband. Yeah. Or my kids or my accountant or something. Like that's not a great time to make a decision or to buy something.
Yeah, absolutely. I articulate to my students when they, communicate and ask about, when they're trying to make one decision over another, or when they're feeling distressed, and just this whole understanding that we don't ever really make any life choices in the midst of chaos or in the midst of crisis. And so sometimes coming off of a big event, it really is coming almost out of a crisis. It doesn't mean it's catastrophic and it's been life-threatening. However, it has been very taxing and demanding. And so at that time, as you're saying, so such good words of wisdom, that's not when you make those purchases. That's not when you make those life decisions.
Yeah, there's there's two types of stress. There's distress and eustress, but the body views it exactly the same, right? So the eustress is that positive, euphoric, we're having the show, curtains opening, it's the nerves before the stage. Well, physiologically, the body views that the same as distress, right? Where you're like, I don't have enough money, my husband's mad at me, or whatever it is, right? Physiologically, we experience that to a certain degree the same way, or that's my experience. Like it all lands in my neck.
Right. Yeah.
Doesn't matter if it's a great show or a bad email, it all lands in my neck. I experience it all in my gut, all ends up leaking out of my eyes. Like eventually, physiologically, I have the same experience. So I have to, have that time of, spiritual self-care, physical self-care, emotional and relational self-care. This is something I'm really working on right now. It's just the idea that nothing goes without maintenance forever. And, I have an amazing team. Some of them 20-year veterans, and I have to continue to like court the team, basically. Like we court in a marriage, right? So I have to continue to show up to the meetings. I have to continue to share the vision. I have to continue to share my appreciation, with my kids, with my marriage. Just that idea that nothing goes without maintenance forever. Like your car doesn't, your building doesn't, your parking, your grass, nothing goes without maintenance forever. And I'll respond to my body faster than I will to the relational cues. I don't know if that's how I'm wired, because, my body will actually lay me out flat. It's like, oh my gosh, I have to go to the chiropractor. But typically the relationships don't lay you out flat. They just do this. It's harder to see. So I've found that because I don't see that as well, because I'm usually so focused, I don't see this. I have to create intentional time to look and listen and seek that out. Sure. That's hard for me.
Sure. That's beautiful. Well, the Lord, how beautiful it is that He always is ready to speak and to commune with us, and for us to be able to listen, and cultivating that. It's so important. And I believe we have learned in our Christian manner to separate out and compartmentalize. And we make it very much a spiritual act, which it is in the context of it's only the scriptures that speak, or maybe my only communion with my prayer time with God is what I'm listening to. But if we do listen to the body, he has made and designed these bodies. And if we say it's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives within me, then it's the Spirit of God that is speaking within our bodies. And so the word is so incredible and so powerful. Our time in communion with the Lord and speaking and, having conversation with him, it's so incredibly powerful. But he created us in a body and a soul, with our mind, our will and emotions, and in our spirit. And so
and with that stinking thing, the will, right? Like I still have to participate. So I'm in this constant inner, it's not a battle, but I'm like, I have this inner curiosity about like, okay, Lord, like you formed me, you know my bent, I'm always going to be bent to go, bent to grow, bent to do this. And yet you're giving me the choice to pull back. Yes. And sometimes you will create circumstances that cause me to pull back for my good, but you don't make me to fall. So it's kind of like a spiritual version of that nature versus nurture, like how much is set and how much does the nurture participate in? I'm always curious about that. I don't have an answer, except I've kind of settled down like, okay, Lord, you made me this way, and yet you give me the ability to let the way you made me either be an asset or a liability.
Absolutely.
Towards others and in my relationship with my family and with him, and what I do with it. Because I think anything we have as an asset taken to extreme is a liability, right?
Yeah.
Like he's given me this kind of apostolic thing. Like I like to start things.
Yes.
I don't super like to finish things. I'm more excited about I'm a little bit more jazz handy at the beginning of an idea. And then, as it gets towards the finish, I'm like, oh my gosh, like where are the detail people? Get this big picture girl out of here. So if I don't see things to the finish line, this asset of starting, or at least equip people to see things to the finish line, then I'm constantly confusing my team because it's start and then they're halfway down here and then I'm starting something else. And they're like, okay, am I supposed to be over here with you now starting this new thing? Or am I supposed to be finishing this thing? Kind of goes back to that, like be aware of what's around you and how you're wired and how you're showing up plays out. And that piece I'm very aware of can either be awesome or awful. Right. How I exercise the way I'm made.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah. I have one thing to say, and then we'll go to this next question. As you are articulating how you tend to just feel it in your, neck and shoulders. Sometimes I'll say to my students that it's never going to be in vogue.
I'm doing it right now.
Yeah.
There we go. I remember around a ballet person. Actually, I'm leaning on my counter. That's what's happening. It's not stress. I'm just doing my sloppy posture. Okay, I'm back. I feel like I'm in your class at Bellhaven.
Well, it's never going to be in vogue to wear your shoulders for earrings.
Yeah.
All right. And let's just keep them down.
Yes. Perfect. I love that.
All right. So as you are a leader yourself and you're continuing to cultivate and just instill in others, inspiring, encouraging, equipping, providing tools for others to develop leadership skills, what do you feel like are some of the most important leadership skills to develop and to cultivate?
Yeah, that's a great question. Leadership, I think, is one of the most important and perhaps overused and abused words. For example, servant leadership is a model that's near and dear to me. We work closely with the servant leadership curriculum. It's in our school. We fundraise to get into local high schools. It's something inside of me. I think it's a very godly model of putting others before yourself. Like you can just sum up servant leadership, but I feel like it's also been a word that's just been tossed around, where anything that has a positive public initiative is servant leadership. And I just think we have to be careful about taking, topics that are deep or sacred or profound and just, tossing them around and really trying again to root down and say, what is the essence? I would try to go to the essence. I think it's because I'm a big picture person. I can't handle a lot of details naturally. So I'm like, what is the essence of servant leadership? It's others before self. If you just want to say what's the essence of the entire New Testament? I mean, Jesus himself said, hey, love God, love people, right? So I'm always just trying to find what is the simplest expression of this that I can continually root on, that I continually inform my team about. We can use it as a lens for our decision making. It just becomes both the roots and the filter and the food for everything that we do. So speaking of leadership, and I'm going to call it servant leadership, you know, at our studio, we will say, like, does this serve others? So you can put that on anything. You know, is the way that we are structuring classes and tuition, space, and time serving others? Well, who are the others?
Right.
The teachers, right? It's the parents, it's the students, and then we will wrestle with that, right? Like, are we charging enough to pay the teachers? Because I do believe that the artists should be
Sure.
paid. I mean, that's a biblical model, right? Like, pay the artists what they're worth. Are we charging a valued enough price where people can actually access the arts, right? Are we requiring enough classes where they can learn to grow and develop appropriate technique and dance skills, but are we giving them enough flexibility to go homework, youth group, and do a school activity? So we're constantly using, and it just comes down to this one root, this one filter. Okay, are we doing the highest good for the greatest number of people? Is this decision serving others? So for me, back to your original question, you know, like, what's this most important lesson in leadership? I say, don't overcomplicate it. I think, you know, you can Google leadership. I actually just Googled this. I think it wasn't leadership, but it was how to set goals. And it was 900 million hits on Google, 906 million hits on how to set goals. And if you want to Google how to finish goals, there's like 100 million.
Wow. Wow.
And the gap between setting a goal and finishing a goal is usually complexity. Like,
sure.
The thing that will make that not happen is complexity. So if you want to apply that story to leadership, you know, I haven't done it, but I'm sure if you search leadership, there's hundreds of millions of, you know, data points on leadership out there, right? But on, you know, actually living leadership is probably far less. And I think the gap between I want to be a leader and I'm leading well is usually complexity. You know, I love, you know, this is a non-church example, but I love Nordstrom's is famous. They have this handbook, and it says the Nordstrom's employee handbook. It's a one sheet of paper, and you flip it on the other side, and it says like something like, make common sense decisions. Like, do the right thing.
Yeah.
Like, do the right thing. Like, if you just do the right thing. So I always think of, like, okay, does this love God? Does this love people? You know, is this putting others first? I just try to keep it simple. And I think you could write many, many chapters on what does that look like in many, many areas of life, but it still just has to come down to something simple that everybody can be on the same page about.
Yeah, that's good.
Oh,
Really
Cynthia,
good.
you were muted there for a second. I think that might have been.
That's my bad. It's really good. Well, looking at this next question related to just the arts, and obviously you are just throughout the nation and have a lot of different schools that are affiliated with you around the United States, and I'm sure that there's other global content, connections that you have as well. Just wondering, what do you feel like and what do you see and believe God is doing through the arts today? And that can be in the sphere of in dance competition or in education or in this sense of advocacy, how artists can be, cultivate their gift to serve. And just, I'd love to hear your perspective on how you feel like God's moving today in the arts.
Yeah, so something that comes to mind right away is I think that and I've always been attracted to working with the teenage group I love little kids. They're joyful and they're fun and they're adorable on stage, but my heart's always been with that secondary education. That's when I got my grad degree. It was 6th grade to 12th grade, because I feel like those kids are at the age where every day they're making decisions about who they are and where they want to go with their life. Again, to just make it really simple, it's all about identity and direction. I mean, those are two very, very core things to the teenage life. They're starting to separate from their parents, and they have to figure out, apart from my parent, apart from my parents' values, who am I? What are the decisions and the things that matter and I believe about me and for me, and where is that going to inform me? Mm-hmm. So I also think that we are at an epidemic high number of anxiety, reported anxiety, depression, suicide. I just feel like there is a real, if you want to use spiritual language, like just a real spirit of oppression over our young people right now. And I feel like dance has the opportunity to break that off. And I have seen it firsthand. We participate in an annual convention called Dance Revolution. I've been on faculty there for 11 years. And we will put kids on a bus down to Dallas, Texas. Any kid who wants to go 8th grade and up, I will pay for them to go. We've done it for, I think, 18 years now. I mean, well before I was on faculty there. And because when they get in an environment, when they're hearing a message where like you have worth and value that was DNA assigned at birth, and nothing that you can do can add to that or take away from that. Like we just get down to this core identity piece, like the non-negotiable identity. Last year with Dance Revolution, they had this theme that was about I am. And I think a lot of times in popular culture is like, oh, you know, I'm beautiful or I'm strong or I'm powerful. And those are all positive things, but they're also all super temporal things, right? Because what if you got in a car accident and you're not beautiful or you're not powerful or you're not strong or any of those things change. So it's like, let's focus with kids on the things that are non-negotiable. They are loved by their creator. That's non-negotiable. They were DNA wired for great things. That's not negotiable. Doesn't matter their zip code, their economic status, what they look like, how they dance, like all those things are non-negotiable. You know, they have the ability to make great choices. These are non-negotiable truths about kids. So I feel like when you combine those non-negotiable truths through a listening channel, they will hear. If they like music and dance, they're going to hear that through music and dance where they might not hear it from a parent and they might not hear it from a pulpit.
Right.
I just think we're in this really unique time in history where the arts and education have an opportunity to have a profound influence. I mean, these kids are growing up as digital natives. You know, when I was a kid, if I had a problem, I would go home and it would kind of just dissipate by the next day. Now they go home and it's amplified, right? Yes. Over and over and over again. And they're growing up in this world where, you know, the rules of this, you know, this new social economy are being written while they're growing up in it. And it's amplifying their anxiety. It's amplifying the spirit of depression. It's amplifying, I mean, sometimes even all the choice we have as a, you know, an economically fairly stable society is like, well, I could do this, I could do this, I could do this, I could. We're just in an age where I feel like the enemy's having a heyday with the hearts and minds of our youth. And we have a unique opportunity to sum it up as parents, teachers, people who care about kids, to just root them down in non-negotiable, simple messages that will become a part of their core fabric, that will be that lens through which they view all of their decision-making. Like, even if they can't get to, I think you and I would be on the same page. I would say I call myself a born-again Christian. You know, I always knew God loved me, but at some point I chose to make that a personal, like I always knew God was love, but at some point I made it a personal message about God's loves Misty, if that makes sense. Sure. Even if they can't get to, you know, if her name's Caitlin and Caitlin can't get to God loves Caitlin, but she can get to God is love. Yes. And we can start there, or God, then we can finish the sentence, God loves Caitlin, but we have to start with God is rooted in love. And then we can get to God loves Caitlin. And then we can finish the sentence, God loves Caitlin and created her beautifully and fearfully and wonderfully made. Okay, now we can finish that sentence and make a paragraph. God loves Caitlin and made her beautifully and wonderfully and has a great hope in future for her. And she can do all things through Christ who strengthens her. Like, you can build this beautiful narrative off of life. But I just feel like with our teens and youth, they've been so turned off and for any number of reasons to, you know, to church, or, you know, to there being, you know, a singular way to salvation or a singular spiritual path. So let's just start with what we can agree on. Yeah. It's kind of like what I'm doing with YPAD, right? Right. Like, we can start with safety. If we can do that, well, then we could extend the conversation here. And eventually, could we extend the conversation to, it would probably be a good idea that there should probably be an educational standard to be a dance teacher, because there's an educational standard to groom a dog in the state of Wisconsin. So maybe there should be an educational standard to bend children in half. Right. Yeah. But you start with something basic we can agree on. Yeah. And I feel like we have a great chance. I mean, kids at my studio sometimes spend more time with us than they do at home. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's so rich. It makes me think about just in that place of establishing trust, really, you are establishing that foundational truth. And from that, you have to have buy-in, you know, you have to have somebody that's going to come alongside and agree.
And from that, then allow that to be a part of their story that is transformative. And then after it's transformative personally, then I understand my position and my stance and reason and purpose for being created and designed. Then I get to be a part of that transformative culture making. So
absolutely. And I think that's kind of like the big, if there's a, I don't know, I'm trying to choose my language carefully. If there's a downside to the messaging of like, like just get saved. I think the downside is people think there's no work after it.
correct.
Right. And immediately after, like I went to, some sort of a mountaintop experience, I went to camp, or I, said a prayer, or I did this thing. Right. And now they're expecting some sort of magic to happen on the other side. And it's a relationship. All you did was just to agree with God that he loves you. He made you for a purpose, that he redeemed you, and now he can be in relationship with you. You just made an agreement.
Yeah. Yeah.
Basically, to have this lifelong relationship. Now you got to walk the relationship. So I feel like there's so much focus right now about like the moment, about the decision. And I don't want to downplay the decision, because everybody has to decide what they're going to do with God and with Jesus. Like everybody has to decide that. But I feel like we put too much of the emphasis on there and not enough on, the actual discipleship piece, the journey. Like, what does it mean? What does it mean to know that God loves you when the bottom falls out of your world?
Yeah. Well, it seems like from what I know about your work, your calling, how God has just placed in you such a burden and just a life call to carry that understanding beyond. Like as a dancer, as a teacher, educator, we know that we have this end result where we're trying to help to develop particular dance skills. That's a part of the end result. We probably all would hopefully agree that our influence is making better humans along the way too, that they're more rich and more whole. But as I'm hearing you articulate, it's about not that mountaintop performance experience. It's the process. It's about the whole richness of the becoming and all of these things that God has just placed in your heart to, in your entrepreneurial endeavors to continue to build and establish and grow. And in the times I've been able to, communicate with you, it's just like, there's so much yet to do. There's so much yet to come. It's like, whoa.
And that's why I get impatient sometimes. I'm like, all right, God, like let's roll. And I heard, I want to say I was listening to a TD Jakes. So I joke that I do yoga with TD Jakes. Of course I don't. I just happen to play him while I'm running or doing yoga.
Love it.
Because I don't know, like that intensity fits with yoga. I'm not sure why I made that.
Yeah, makes it work. Yeah.
made it work. But he was talking about, if you don't think you are where you're supposed to be by this time, maybe you're just in the boot camp and you don't have, maybe you don't have the relationship muscles or the connections or the network, or like there's a reason why you're not there yet. And maybe instead of just like pushing ahead, maybe you have to step back and say, what are my missing pieces and blocks? Because God in his great mercy is maybe like withholding the promotion, the job, the company, the thing that, you've kind of hung your hat on, as that's going to be it. Because if you would take that now, it'd be a disaster. So I have something I'd like to share with about that. So in my late teens and young adult years, I was kind of a wreck, making lots of not great choices and had a lot of challenges. And that was the time when I was pursuing this whole, like, I want to be a dancer thing.
Yeah.
God in his great mercy pivoted me to the classroom, because if I had gone down that path, auditioning would have destroyed me.
Yeah.
It would have destroyed me. And now, all these years later, I get to teach and dance and perform, and I'm healthy and whole, and I'm able to handle it, and I'm able to use it in the way it's intended. So, I had this 15-year delay from what I thought I wanted to the time that I actually got it, but it's so much more beautiful. And there's many times where I'm like, thank you, Lord, that I did not get what I wanted back then, because I certainly probably wouldn't have this dance school. And I think it may have well destroyed me. I was not in a place where that would have been a healthy choice for me at that time.
Yeah. And God knows those things. And that's where maturing I wish that that came like immediately when you say, okay, it's no longer I who live, but Christ lives within me. All right, and here's the manual. And then go ahead and just flip through and get to the back where it just is going to keep reiterating that God says, I'm slow and I am faithful and I am steadfast. So I just think it's so beautiful that you've grasped these, but you're also admittedly still in that process. And if we all are honest, we all are still in that process. And for me, it's cyclical. I'll get it and I'll hang with it. And it's like, okay, great. I've got that. I understand, but there's all these other ones that I'm still trying to get. And that's the process. Yeah.
Here's the thing that makes me think of right away. So I'll root down and I'm curious and I'm journaling, I'm thinking and I'm praying and, writing or whatever. I mean, I've even tried singing. Like I'll try anything to connect with God. My daughter lived in Chicago the past 2 years and I would like sing prayers the whole way. And you don't probably want to hear me sing prayers, but I was like, you know what? I'll just try that. Like I want to be present and not just drift through my life. So that was my I-90 tactic to do that. So I get really good. And then I'm like, okay, God, I'm clear. And what happens is I'm like, let's go. And then I just go. Yeah. So then I go. And then pretty soon, a few weeks later, I'm like, oh my gosh, or a few months or whatever. I'm like, oh, I'm tired. I'm burnt out. I'm not sure I'm on the right path. I don't know when I really spent time with God. Am I really praying or just giving him my laundry list? Like, am I just talking with him or talking at him? And then I have to pull back again. It's just my hope that I can shorten these cycles over my life.
Yep.
I don't want the cycle to be a year long. I'd really like it to, ideally if I were, some sort of like mature spiritual being, maybe it'd be like a minute, right?
Yeah, right.
Oh my gosh, I'm off track. I would recognize that fast that, my wandering mind and my lack of discipline were taking me into that drift. Yeah. So my goal is just shorten those cycles and have grace for myself and just get back.
Yeah.
Like just come back.
Yeah.
Come back.
Yeah. For me, I agree with you. And there's ways I wish it would like shock, you know what I mean? It would be like, okay, you're a little too far away. Okay, God, what is it? As opposed to like this happening or whatever. Right. It's just like something.
And isn't the beauty in the mystery of all of it? I was listening to a podcast this morning. It was a Chris Bolton podcast. He's like, the beauty is that God has given us this free will. It is God's will for free will. Yes. Like we all have choice in everything, right? So, it's like, it's the beauty and the great challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, in closing, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners, viewers?
I just would love, it's hard to know who's listening. I don't know if it's, dance teachers, performers, artists, if they're working at collegiate level, studio level. So, again, I'm always trying to find what's that, that simplest message that applies to all. And I would just encourage you that, God is, whatever dream he has planted in you, that's stirring, listen to it, and that he's not done with it and he will do more with it than you can. Like just to continue to yield that. And I'll use this simple example of our building. Our old building was across the street and we had challenges with it. Our sprung floors needed to be redone. It needed repairs and carpet, and we were out parking and just like very physical things. And so I was like, Lord, we need a way. I either need the cash to do these physical things or the financing, or we need more we need something. But I'm like, but it's your project, your thing. And I waited for 8 years. So I bought the land across the street to build this building, and it was continually like, I tried, it didn't work. I tried, it didn't work. We wanted the money, we were denied. We, wanted the plan, the city didn't like it. Like just everything we tried was, it didn't work. And in the meantime, I'm in pain. Like parents are complaining and teachers are complaining. The classes are running too late. And then when it did open up, it became so much more than I could have ever asked for or imagined. And I want to really make this concrete and practical. I don't mean it to be, cliche or just, throwing a verse at it, but I didn't have more than just great dancing when I was first in pain at my studio. Yes. If I had built at that time, I would have just built a bigger studio. Right. Now we built a whole international performing arts center because, I believe that God could see what I would be doing 8 years at that time and what it really needed to be. What a crying shame that would have been if I had gone from a 12,000 square foot facility with 50 parking spaces to, whatever, a 20% bigger on both sides, not knowing that we would be doing this completely different thing. So I would say just be patient with the process. And, I write down these God moments because there's so many times when I'm not feeling it, not hearing it, not seeing it. And then I look back and I'm like, well, I was in a jam there and he didn't let me down. I didn't die here. Like, he rescued me here. He gave me the wisdom here. We showed up with the financing here. To look back, and that's what builds my faith muscle. It's like a big giant crochet loop, right? Like, actually, I don't crochet. I don't know if that's the proper thing. Maybe it's a loop of some kind. I thought people crochet, but it's like, I'm casting my eyes out here. I want this, but I have to come back here and get this experience and these skills. And then I go out here further than where I was.
Yeah.
Right now it's scary out here and I don't know what to do. So I can look back at the previous loop and say, oh, yeah, okay, this is how it's done. And I actually think that's why, for me, the Bible is so rich, because I just want to see people who did things that are bigger. And I love reading biographies. I'm like, tell me how people did this.
Yeah.
Like, God, show me what's possible through other people's stories. So if anything in my story shows anybody else what's possible, then, that's just my greatest hope for today.
That's gorgeous. Well, I know you inspire many, and I know that, again, there's still so much yet to come, and where he's leading you and the team that you're working with and who he keeps bringing together, and more opportunities and more studios that are really grasping these valuable just principles and understandings of how to be servants and to serve well in their own callings. So I just bless you, my friend, in all of these continued endeavors in your home, in your household, as you're mothering those amazing, it's 5 children.
Yes, 5, 18, 16, 14, 12, and 10.
Your relationship with your husband, and just that there would be that reprieve and that space and that time to retreat back into that sanctuary, safe haven, because I know he keeps catapulting you out again and again. So it's just an honor. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. And if anybody needs to connect with me, you can find me at mistylown@gmail.com or online at Misty Lown.
Perfect. We'll make sure we make those connections so people can see that at the bottom of this. Misty, thank you very, very much.
Thanks so much. Thanks, everyone. You have a great day.